How does a boy taken hostage at 10, starved and abused, grow into Ireland's greatest peacemaker? What kind of sanctity can navigate the impossible position of being Archbishop of Dublin during the Norman invasion of Ireland, caught between Irish kings demanding resistance and Norman conquerors demanding submission? Why did Ireland's most powerful churchman, who could have lived in luxury and safety, die in exile at age 52, exhausted from endless diplomatic missions trying to preserve peace between enemies who both considered him a traitor? This is the story of St. Lawrence O'Toole, the last native Irish Archbishop of Dublin, who spent his life building bridges between enemies and died trying, proving that true holiness in turbulent times means choosing the impossible path of peace when everyone else chooses war. Would you still believe in peace if your story began in chains? If so, this video is for you. Like and subscribe for more stories where sanctity means sacrifice, and history's quiet heroes walk through fire. The year was 1128. In Gaelic Ireland, fragmented into a dozen rival kingdoms, a child was born who would change history. They called him Lorcan Ua Tuathail, Lawrence O'Toole. His father was a chieftain, a warrior of the noble Ui Tuathail dynasty in Leinster. In that land where every hill had its king and every valley its contested borders, Lawrence grew up to the sound of swords and stories of ancient battles. But at age 10, his childhood ended abruptly. In 1138, Diarmait Mac Murchada, known to the English as Dermot MacMurrough, the king of Leinster and bitter rival of his father, raided their fortress. He didn't come to kill, he came for something worse. He took Lawrence as hostage. In the political practice of Irish warfare, hostages were leverage, tools to break the resistance of enemy families. And Diarmait intended to break the boy. For 2 years, Lawrence lived in deliberately cruel conditions. They starved him, kept him in cold, damp cells, denied him every comfort, every kindness. Food came scarce, water was dirty. Sunlight, a distant memory. The boy's body weakened, bones protruding beneath stretched skin. But something inside him refused to break. In the darkest hours, when hunger gnawed and cold penetrated to the marrow, Lawrence prayed. He whispered the psalms he'd learned as a small child, seeking in God what men denied him. In 1140, when he was 12, a political bargain was finally struck. Lawrence was released, returned to his family. They might have expected the boy to come back thirsting for revenge, hardened by hatred. Instead, he made a choice that stunned everyone. He didn't want to return to the world of warriors and feuds. He asked to enter the monastery of Glendalough, the ancient monastic city founded by St. Kevin centuries before, hidden in a green valley among the Wicklow Mountains. There, among the old stones and silent lakes, the traumatized hostage found what he'd been seeking: peace, healing, a vocation. The wounds of the body healed slowly, but those of the spirit found balm in prayer. Lawrence threw himself into monastic life with a hunger deeper than what he'd known in Diarmait's cells: hunger for God, hunger for meaning, hunger to transform pain into something beautiful. The hostage had become a monk. The victim had become a peacemaker. Glendalough was more than a monastery. It was an entire holy city. Round towers soaring toward the sky, 7 churches scattered through the valley, stone cells where monks prayed in the darkest hours of night. Founded by St. Kevin in the 6th century, Glendalough meant the Valley of Two Lakes, and the dark water reflected the sky like a mirror of eternity. Here, Lawrence found not just refuge, but home. He learned quickly. Latin flowed from his tongue with ease, scripture imprinted on his mind, and psalms became the rhythm of his breathing. But he wasn't just a scholar, he was a man of deep prayer. Other monks found him kneeling before the crucifix at dawn, before the bell even rang for lauds. At night, when others slept, Lawrence kept vigil. Prayer for him wasn't duty but desire, not imposition but irresistible attraction. In 1153, At the age of just 25, something extraordinary happened. The monks of Glendalough elected him abbot. He was the youngest abbot in all of Ireland. Some grumbled, how could such a young man lead such an ancient and important abbey? But Lawrence answered with deeds, not words. Under his guidance, Glendalough was reborn. He restored discipline that had grown lax over the years. He rebuilt buildings that had fallen into disrepair. But most of all, he renewed the spirit of prayer that had made this place a beacon of holiness. Yet despite being abbot, Lawrence lived no differently than the poorest monks. He slept on a stone floor, refusing any mattress. He ate the simplest, scarcest food. He spent hours in prayer while others rested. Every day, under his direction, the poor were fed at the monastery gates. Bread was distributed, hot soups shared, and cloaks given when winter came. Lawrence gave away everything, his portion of food, his better clothes, every coin that arrived. Christ is in the poor, he would say, and how can I refuse Christ? His reputation spread throughout Ireland. Strangers came to Glendalough just to see the holy abbot. The sick sought his blessing. Sinners sought his counsel. And Lawrence welcomed everyone with the same patient gentleness he'd learned through suffering. But Ireland was changing. The 12th century church needed reform. Married clergy were common. Simony was widespread, and discipline was lax. The waves of European reform were reaching Irish shores, and the Pope was pushing for standardization. Lawrence embraced reform, but with wisdom. He wanted Roman structure with Celtic soul. Discipline without losing the Irish mystical spirit. Order without extinguishing the fire. Success as abbot led to a heavier burden, the archbishopric. In 1162, at age 34, Lawrence received news that changed everything. He'd been appointed Archbishop of Dublin. The city was a crossroads of cultures, founded by Vikings centuries before, now inhabited by Norse Irish, Gaelic Irish, and English merchants. Politically complex, ecclesiastically complicated. Dublin was technically under the High King of Ireland, but practically independent. The city looked both west toward Gaelic Ireland and east toward England and Canterbury. Lawrence was the first Gaelic Irish archbishop. Previous ones had been Norse Irish. The appointment carried heavy symbolism. Unite a divided city. Assert Irish church independence from Canterbury. Lead during uncertain times. His response was simple: pastoral care over politics, service over power. He arrived in Dublin not in pomp, but in humility, still wearing his worn monastic habit. He refused the luxurious archbishop's palace. He transformed it into a hospice for the poor. He himself lived in a small cell, continuing to sleep on the stone floor as he'd done at Glendalough. Every day, the poor were fed at his table, not as an occasional gesture of charity, but as daily practice. Lawrence sat with them, shared their bread, listened to their stories. The coins that arrived in the archdiocese coffers immediately went out toward hospitals, schools, and churches for Dublin's poor neighborhoods. But he didn't limit himself to charity. He reformed the cathedral chapter, introducing the Augustinian rule. He insisted the clergy live in community under a rule, not in private houses in luxury. He himself joined the communal life, the archbishop who lived as a monk. Wealthy priests objected. They preferred comfort to rules. Lawrence responded with example, never with force. If they had to live in poverty, he would live in even greater poverty. If they had to pray the hours, he would pray twice as much. But his role transcended Dublin. Ireland in the 1160s was a fragmented mosaic of warring kingdoms. The High King was contested, with more claimants than certainties. Violence was endemic. Ancient feuds burned like fires never extinguished. Lawrence became a mediator, traveling between rival courts, negotiating truces, trying to build peace in a land that knew only war. Why did they listen to him? Because Lawrence had no political ambitions. He sought no power for himself, only peace for his people. His personal holiness was evident. Hard men who'd seen 1,000 deceptions recognized something different in him. A man who didn't lie. A man who didn't betray. A man who genuinely cared. Yet challenges grew. Irish kings quarreled. Norman lords across the sea eyed Ireland with hungry eyes. Canterbury claimed authority over the Irish Church. And Lawrence, in the middle, tried to hold together the pieces of a world beginning to unravel. Then everything changed. The Normans invaded. It was 1169. Lawrence was 41 years old, and the world he knew was about to collapse. It all began with one man, Diarmait Mac Murchada, the same king who had held Lawrence hostage as a child. Expelled from Ireland by his rivals, Diarmait sought help from England's King Henry II. Henry, cunning and ambitious, gave permission to his Anglo-Norman nobles to intervene. It was an invasion disguised as personal assistance. In August, year 1170, Richard de Clare, nicknamed Strongbow, landed with his army. The Normans brought shock and awe. Armored knights, rapid stone fortifications, disciplined archery. The conquest was swift and brutal. Dublin fell. Leinster was secured. Gaelic Ireland, which had never known foreign conquest, reeled under the blow. September, year 1170, Lawrence's finest hour. Dublin was under siege, the Norse-Irish trying to retake it from the Normans. Battle raged in the streets. Swords flashed, blood ran on the stones. The cries of the wounded filled the air. And then, through the smoke and chaos, a figure walked into the middle of the battle, unarmed, wearing only his monastic habit, Lawrence. He stopped between the fighting lines, arms open. "Enough!" he cried. "In the name of God, enough!" Something in his courage, or his madness, stopped the men. Swords lowered. Silence spread like a wave. Lawrence negotiated a temporary truce, right there, in the middle of the bloodied street. He saved countless lives that day, but he knew it was only a breath. Norman control was established. In 1171, King Henry II himself arrived in Ireland. Worried that Strongbow was becoming too independent, Henry took personal control. One after another, Irish kings came to bow before him. Some from fear, some from calculation, some because they saw no other choice. Ireland, which had never had a central ruler, now found itself under the English heel. Lawrence found himself in an impossible position. The Irish expected resistance. Why wasn't the Archbishop calling for revolt? The Normans demanded submission. Why was he hesitating to recognize Henry? His choice was to walk a razor's edge, neither total resistance nor total capitulation. He sought to preserve Irish autonomy within the new reality. He negotiated with both sides. The Irish saw him as too soft with the invaders. The Normans saw him as too loyal to the Irish. It's the fate of every peacemaker to be suspected by all. At the Synod of Cashel in 1172, Irish bishops accepted, under pressure, Henry's overlordship. Lawrence tried to secure guarantees for Irish church independence. He succeeded partially. The Irish church preserved some of its distinctiveness, but England's shadow now covered everything. Centuries of English rule had begun. Peace was fragile. His work was far from over. The 1170s were an endless whirlwind of diplomacy. Lawrence had been appointed papal legate to Ireland, the Pope's personal representative. He traveled constantly to Irish kings, Norman lords, the English court, Rome. He crossed the Irish Sea in dangerous conditions, season after season. The icy waves, fierce winds, driving rain. He passed 40, and his health declined under the stress and austerity. The Treaty of Windsor in 1175 was his greatest diplomatic achievement. Lawrence negotiated between Irish High King Ruaidhrí Ua Conchobar and King Henry II. The terms Henry recognized as overlord, but Irish kings retained internal autonomy. The goal was to stop Norman expansion, preserve Irish kingdoms. Lawrence was the key mediator, drafted the terms, and pushed both sides toward compromise. The result? Temporary peace. But ultimately, the treaty failed. Norman nobles in Ireland ignored it, continuing to seize lands. Lawrence's frustration grew. Political solutions were inadequate. Violence continued. Agreements were broken almost as soon as ink dried on parchment. Meanwhile, conflict with Canterbury deepened. The English claimed authority over the Irish Church. Lawrence defended Irish Church independence. The Pope tried to balance both sides. Lawrence traveled to Rome multiple times, arguing the Irish case. His worn sandals had walked more roads than most men ever saw. In 1179, Lawrence attended the Third Lateran Council in Rome. He argued for Irish church rights, against English encroachment. He was respected by Pope and cardinals alike. His holiness was evident to all. But politics complicated everything. Treaties meant little when power was at stake. Words meant less when swords spoke louder. His personal life remained one of austere monasticism despite endless travel. Wherever he stayed, he slept on the floor, fasted, and prayed for hours. His companions were amazed by his endurance, his austerity. Miracles were reported during his lifetime, healings, prophecies. But Lawrence never drew attention to them. His focus was always peace, unity, service, never personal advantage. Each journey took its toll. His body grew weaker, his hair turned gray, lines deepened on his face, but his eyes remained clear, his purpose unwavering. He was burning himself out for a peace that never quite came. Yet he couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. While one person still suffered from violence, and one conflict remained unresolved, he would keep trying. One final mission remained. It would kill him. By 1180, Lawrence was 52 years old and visibly exhausted. His health was broken from years of stress, travel, and extreme austerity. A new crisis had emerged. English King Henry II had grown hostile to the Irish Church. Henry wanted tighter control. Lawrence resisted. The two men, once able to negotiate, now found themselves at an impasse that seemed unbridgeable. Fall, year 1180. Lawrence was summoned to Normandy, Henry's French territories. The mission: negotiate church-state relations, defend Irish interests one more time. The journey was perilous, an autumn crossing of the Irish Sea, and Lawrence was already ill before he departed. Fever burned in his body. His chest ached with every breath. But he went anyway. Peace required it. He arrived in Normandy and sought an audience with King Henry, but Henry, whether from political calculation or personal spite, refused to see him. Week after week, Lawrence waited. He sent messages. He pleaded for a meeting. Nothing. The king's courtiers gave excuses, made promises, and delivered delays. Henry would not grant him an audience. Lawrence's health deteriorated rapidly. The stress, the cold, the exhaustion, everything combined to break what little strength remained. By November, he was critically ill. Unable to continue, he moved to the Augustinian monastery at Aix, a coastal town in Normandy. The canons there cared for him as best they could. Clean sheets, warm broth, gentle prayers. But everyone could see death approaching. Lawrence knew. He'd known for weeks, perhaps months. His work was ending, and he had no illusions about its success. Politically, he'd failed. The Norman conquest continued. Irish autonomy was disappearing, and the divisions he'd tried to heal remained open wounds. But he felt no bitterness. Not toward Henry's rejection, not about political failures, not even about dying in exile, far from the Dublin he'd served for 18 years. His final days were spent in prayer, receiving the sacraments, and making his peace with God. He spoke little. When he did, it was about Ireland, about peace, about hope, that someday reconciliation would come. The canons who attended him said his face grew luminous, as if light were shining from within. On November 14, 1180, St. Lawrence O'Toole died peacefully in that small monastery room. He was 52 years old. He died in exile, in France, far from Ireland. He died, having been denied even an audience with the king he'd come to meet. He died, having failed to prevent the conquest of his homeland, political failure, complete spiritual triumph. A compromise was reached. His body remained at Eu, where miracles were reported at his tomb, while his heart was brought to Christ Church Cathedral in Dublin, where it was venerated for centuries. Stolen in 2012 and recovered in 2018, Ireland never forgot its shepherd. St. Lawrence O'Toole was the last native Irish Archbishop of Dublin for centuries. After him came English appointments, colonial control, and the systematic replacement of Irish leadership with English administrators. His death marked a transition, the end of Gaelic Irish Church leadership in Dublin, the beginning of long foreign domination. He was canonized in the year 1225, 45 years after his death, by Pope Honorius III. He was the first Irish saint canonized through the formal papal process, recognition of his heroic virtue, his miracles, his holiness. Yet despite this official recognition, Lawrence faded from popular memory. Why? He died during a period of Irish defeat. He was associated with loss, with the beginning of English rule. Anglo-Norman chroniclers downplayed Irish saints. Centuries of English rule suppressed Irish Catholic identity. Later saints, post-Reformation martyrs who died resisting Protestant England, were politically more useful. Lawrence's complex legacy, his negotiations with invaders, made some see him as compromised. And he had no dramatic martyrdom, no spectacular miracles, just steady, faithful, exhausting holiness. But he should be remembered. For political holiness, he proved that sanctity is possible in messy political reality. He navigated an impossible situation with grace, showing that politics and holiness aren't incompatible if integrity remains uncompromised. For peacemaking, his entire life was dedicated to reconciliation. From childhood hostage trauma to archbishop mediating national crises, he used personal courage, met with enemies, and risked his safety repeatedly. He saved lives. He reduced violence. Even when he couldn't stop the conquest, he made it less bloody than it might have been. For austerity and service, an archbishop living as an austere monk. His wealth went to the poor. His power was used for others, never for himself. His example stands as a rebuke to clergy who seek status over service. For Irish identity, he represented the last gasp of independent Irish church authority. He balanced reform with tradition, Roman structure with Celtic spirituality. He preserved Irish distinctiveness amid English pressure. He became a symbol of Irish resilience, identity, and faith. And for failure as holiness, politically, he failed. The Normans won, Ireland was conquered. But spiritually, he succeeded. He maintained his faith. He served faithfully. He teaches that success isn't measured by outcomes, but by faithfulness. This offers encouragement for everyone whose efforts seem futile. In divided societies today, Lawrence offers an example of bridge building in ethnic and political conflict. His method: meet with enemies, listen, seek common ground. His warning: peacemakers satisfy no one fully. His encouragement: peacemaking is holy work, even when it seems unsuccessful. For church-state relations, he models how to defend the church without violence, how to navigate political power without compromise, and how to distinguish Caesar's realm from God's. He shows that spiritual mission takes priority over political expediency. For those facing burnout, he offers both warning and permission. Warning: Even saints have limits. Lawrence burned out by age 52. Lesson: some battles can't be won. Permission: to rest, to withdraw, to accept human limitations. Where can he be found today? His body rests at the Abbey of Au in Normandy. His heart is at Christ Church Cathedral in Dublin. His feast day is November 14, the day of his death. He's the patron saint of Dublin and of peace negotiations. His spirit lives wherever people choose the harder path of peace over the easier path of violence, wherever mediators work, exhausted between enemies, wherever Christians try to maintain integrity in politics, wherever the weak seek protection from the strong, wherever failures become holy because they were faithful. The hostage became an archbishop. The victim became a peacemaker. The boy who was starved and abused grew into the man who fed the poor and healed enemies. He negotiated between Irish kings and Norman invaders, satisfying neither but saving lives. He traveled endlessly between Dublin and Canterbury, Rome and London, exhausting himself for peace that never fully came. He died in exile at 52, denied even an audience with the king he'd come to meet. Political failure, spiritual triumph. The last Irish Archbishop of Dublin for centuries. The first Irish saint Rome canonized. St. Lawrence O'Toole, forgotten light of Ireland's darkest hour. His message remains: peacemaking is always worth it, even when peace doesn't come, especially then, because in the kingdom of God, faithfulness matters more than success. Love matters more than victory, and sometimes the holiest thing a person can do is die trying to make peace in a world that prefers war. The hostage became a healer. The prisoner became free. And the peacemaker, though he died in exile, went home to the God of peace at last.